There are a few times in Fallout New Vegas that your character's gear is restricted in some capacity. Beginning Dead Money removes just about everything but quest items from your inventory, and Honest Hearts requires you to get below a certain weight threshold before you make the long trek to Zion. This feature even occurs briefly during one of the many quests in Camp McCarran. Perhaps the most apparent examples of this situation, however, are entering in the casinos on the Strip or the Legion's Fort. In those last three examples, players can actually prevent the loss of some types of weapons by using holdout weapons. There are two different categories of these weapons, holdout and improved holdout weapons, the latter of which requires 50 sneak skills to be successful, but today we are going to be focusing on the former. This list includes a rather wide range of weapons in my opinion. It features unarmed, melee guns, and explosives, leaving only energy weapons being left out. In regards to some of the weapons, namely the Switchblade and Police Pistol, I've already done dedicated runs, so we know that this is possible, but there are still several weapons on the list that we've not used at all. The goal of this run is to build a resourceful, multifaceted build that uses all types of featured weapons while reaching a level 30. We'll of course be playing on very hard and hardcore for this run, so get on your thigh highs and let's test the limits of our prison walls. Before we could begin our journey into the world of sphincter dilation, I had to build my character. I opted to go with a build that featured a high endurance and luck, while relatively average in everything else that mattered. Our character, Susan, is a ghoul and not only has resilience but luck on her side. Being a ghoul with this mod does not provide any negatives or positives and is purely an aesthetic choice, if one could call it that. Something that is relatively important are skills, and for this run I have to go for speech, survival, and repair. This will give me the chance to have a solid character right off the bat in terms of passing skill checks, something that we would need if we want to gain experience. Deciding to focus on fire rate knowing that much of our arsenal was going to be weaker, I grabbed Fast Shot and Logan's Loophole so that we could abuse Kim's as much as possible. I couldn't quite decide on a backstory for Susan outside of being a public accountant, and that wasn't available, so I chose to be none other than what I am, a courier. This gives us an extra 10% movement speed as well as a few other benefits, but overall it won't be noticed throughout much of this run. Starting at the 188 and appreciating my cute dress, I say hello to Daddy before doing some trading. A majority of the things that we get at the start I sell before pushing far to the north to check out the Wreck Caravan. This nets you combat armor sets that we can unload at the next available vendor. Unfortunately, Vendortron can't handle my load, so I have to visit Dr. Usanagi for a few healing supplies instead. For some reason, Freeside feels a little bit more vibrant than usual, and as I walk through what are usually the barren streets, a smile forms across my face. Said smile persists as I meet up with Oris for our usual date. I'm not sure if I like how busy Freeside is, and I opted to not visit all the available buildings, but I'm excited to check them out in future playthroughs. This may have broken Oris a little bit, but eventually he finds out where he needs to go and does his usual business. I was originally concerned that I wouldn't be able to pass the medicine check, but it turns out that I was dumb enough to be smart. Checking in with the usual suspects, I managed to defuse the situation with the NCR, granting me several level ups. A few critical things that I grab is more speech, Black Widow, survival, and our favorite perk, Radchild. Deciding that I didn't want to interrupt Gloria at the Silver Rush during her presentation, I made a sandwich instead. Showing up late for my new job, I sniffed the inside of my customers' faces. This oddly reminded me of a chalkboard, and I felt the sudden urge to cough as if white dust was still in my fingers when I went to go blow my nose. I'm still talking about the chalk and not any other kind of white powder, though I might as well be. Becoming a dealer of sorts, I check out one of the new bars in town and drink out of their toilet. I can't say that it wasn't particularly delicious, but I'll definitely have to keep it in mind if I don't want to drink out of the clean facilities that the Kings have. It isn't long before I pass the credit check and meet Mr. Holdout. As one would expect, his merchandise can be snuck into a casino. The biggest reasons why one would want to have a holdout weapon is for securing one's well-being inside of a casino, or for those with an aversion against the Legion, to tackle the fort. Outside of that, holdout weapons are quite niche, making me eager to find out how effective they are. I pop inside the tops after buying chems at Gomorrah so that I could ultimately grab Comprehension and lure Benny back to his place thanks to Black Widow. Several ones that I have done in the past have featured a certain connection with Benny that I opted not to go for. This makes Black Widow slightly less effective, but it does allow me to showcase how amazing chems are. Even at level 6, the Courier is an absolute menace to society. Though I won't be playing with stealth too much this run, Sneak will be useful to get the drop on a few enemies, so I'm sure to toss a couple points that way. After talking with Yes Man, I meet up with Joanna and put in a great deal of effort into passing one of the most useless speech checks possible. I haven't done this quest in ages, and it will still likely be ages before I do it again because I am quite stupid. Watching Mr. House explain his LEGO collection in an attempt to woo me, I forever pledge my allegiance to his mustache and began getting a jump start on what he will ask of me in the future to prepare for my visit to the fort. George gets the worst of my pent-up sexual aggression. I grab Light Touch at level 8 once getting past the Boomer's bombardment, and Loyal gives me the go-ahead to repair the solar panels. With high repair and comprehension, I do just that before placing down Loyal's emitter to take out the ants inside. One of the saddest parts about doing weapon-restricted runs is being unable to use random weapons that you come across. The Assault Carbine is one of my favorite weapons, and the only thing I could do is glaze it with my penis fingers. A few people have expressed to me in the past that my addiction can be bamboozling, and I wanted to take the time to let you know that I'm not like the other girls. Jessup recognizes my girth, allowing me to put a few more points into medicine. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite enough to cure Walter White's cancer, so I pressed on, breaking into Helios One as I went. For my efforts, I was rewarded with an emergency radio. Given this momentous occasion, I feel it is imperative to talk to you about your car's extended warranty. Let's just say that I've got a fantastic deal for you, and if your car's programming falters at any point, we can take a look at it free of charge. Also, we cover pet euthanization. Suddenly realizing that my brain cells are not healing fast enough, I head over to Repcon headquarters and drink out of one of their several toilets. This water is the most delicious that I have found, and will become a new staple to avoid the typical devil's butthole visit. To secure my financial future, I've taken to avoiding shopping on Amazon late at night. In exchange, I have decided to install way too many mods in Fallout New Vegas. I mention this now for reasons that I want to expressly state that my butt puckered in realizing that Assaultrons have been added to my game. This was something that I didn't expect and drastically changed how I played this area given how deadly they proved even in the Mojave. After getting past them with the help of some chems, I fought with trying to avoid the laser tripwire but was unsuccessful. I was so scared during this process that I forgot to grab a scrap metal and I scoured the upper portion of the facility trying to find one that didn't involve me going back through the robot death maze. This is where I met Python. I unfortunately had neither of the requirements, but figuring that since it was a robot it probably had scrap metal on it. I was right. Redirecting the power to Fremont and Westside like a good little boy, I fight with Ignacio trying to get him to realize that I've completed the quest because of my own stupid desire for dopamine, causing me to expedite the completion of this game. Boone saw the rise and fall of my chest and realized that I needed somebody just as much as he did. I had him blast Jenny Mae Crawford, and I was able to steal her key to open up her safe. For those players who choose to spec in a lockpick every single playthrough, what are your favorite locks to open outside of your girlfriend's chastity cage? Cliff Briscoe was obviously bamboozled by that question, but he still provided me with various magazines and a backpack for increased carry weight. Wanting to feel attractive despite my loose skin flaps, I purchased the Naughty Nightwear from Ralph and went to go bust the bank at all the available casinos. With my ridiculously high luck, I was of course very successful, allowing me to get several implants. In addition to my earnings and selling everything that wasn't nailed down in a mile radius, that's 1.6 kilometers for those of you who are simply better human beings, I was able to purchase arguably the best standard holdout weapon of the game, Little Devil. According to the wiki, this is some of the highest DPS on the chart, so I was filled with so much liquid courage that it oozed out of all my holes. This immediately backfired and I had to use several chems to get through a rather challenging combat encounter. Fortunately, I obtained more medicine and the perk Finesse through my efforts. Finesse was of course useful for additional damage, but medicine was something that I wanted to get when I was helping the boomers. That's right, my primary objective during all of that was to get enough experience to be able to heal Argyle's patients. Why I took that particular route, I am not sure, but I am very happy that I managed to stick with it and come out on top. Or rather the bottom, specifically of Lake Mead. After blowing the ballast and returning to Pearl, I appreciate all the glory that this achievement has brought me. I felt relatively confident at this point, so I mosey my way over to the Legion camp. Since I hadn't done anything to harm them yet, it was no problem for me to walk through and I was even able to keep all of my weapons should I have the desire to use them. I did really want to shoot Siri because she wouldn't let me get some healing powder from her. I just wanted a little bump, but the only bump I got was of the booty variety when Caesar kicked me out of his tent. Mr. House's mustache greeted me and I immediately felt like I was more confident to be able to tackle the situation. I was wrong. It turns out that Assaultrons were added to this bunker and they weren't of the friendly variety. You would think with how inexplicably caked up that they were, that they'd at least have a little bit of charisma, but they don't. I must have killed approximately half a dozen, which I believe is 6, until I ran out of ammo and I had to retreat. I had hoped that the weather station guards would be able to assist me, but they chose to do nothing of the sort. I ultimately broke my way out of the fort, purchased more ammo, and finished clearing out the rest of the Robotissies. This allowed me to insert the chip for Mr. House and fool Caesar into thinking that I was working for him. The mustachioed man was who I was going to be siding with for this run, and no skirt-wearing physically fit men were going to take that away from me. Cucino, though unfamiliar with my desires, supported my notions just as long as I supported his. Doing some back and forth between Troik and Big Sal, I am able to successfully plant the Thermite as well as Black Mount Gladden and get Gomorrah looking like art. One could also describe the method in which I took down Big Sal and Nero as art, and that would cause me to blush, almost as much as what I do when Mr. House gives me a compliment. The next main story mission is to blow up the Brotherhood of Steel, and I unfortunately didn't feel like I had enough confidence to do the deed. It's safe to say that the story missions are on the back burner until I get a little bit tougher. This essentially saw me doing a series of random quests for experience, and increasing my familiarity with the gear. Cass sends me over to McLafferty. McLafferty sends me over to Thomas Eldrin. I buy some ammo from the Great Khan's armory before pushing my way over to Vault 22 by proxy. Having enough ammo is certainly one of the things that is required to shoot somebody, but another is having a gun. The weapon condition on Little Devil almost made it so I didn't have a gun, and this was worrisome to say the least, but eventually I got through the spore carriers. I just had a very vivid mental picture of these guys acting as a parasite and climbing up your booty when you are taking a poop. I hope you aren't on the toilet watching this. I did try to ignite the gas down on lower levels, but this didn't work and caused Keeley to meet a dastardly demise. Since I was already at the camp of Green Gooners while turning in There Stands the Grass, I interrogated Silus, which is another one of the very few locations that allow you to bring in holdout weapons. This nets me a decent amount of experience for a fun quest, but I quickly find myself in Freeside lusting over more. For the followers of the apocalypse, I set up a business relationship with the Atomic Wranglers and help out the local addicts. Addicted to damage, I tried to repair my gun, but I quickly realized that Major Knight wasn't willing to lend me a hand. With the repair costing almost 27,000 caps, I turned towards different methods of improving its condition. My plan at this point was to either find weapon repair kits or obtain jury rigging, but until then I would try to conserve condition as much as possible by using the Mad Bomber perk and MFC grenades. One thing you'll find out about how I built this character is that it is a jack of all trades. I was shocked at how well a few key perks from each build can make a build in and of itself. If you want a halfway decent melee build, all you really need is Super Slam, as once you get the enemy on the ground, it really doesn't matter how much damage you do. For a decent explosive build, getting Demolition Expert and Mad Bomber made dealing damage and obtaining explosives relatively trivial. Since we had spec'd into critical damage by way of luck, our guns did fantastic damage. A lot of my runs feature adaptability and show that almost any weapon in the game can deal decent damage with the right build and chems. As I complete Come Fly With Me, I can't help but be thankful for the progress we've achieved so far. For someone who refuses to spec in a lockpick outside of very select builds, the McLafferty's quest to steal the information from the gun runners can prove quite challenging. Ultimately, however, if you manage to shoot one of the guards outside, they will come and unlock the door for you, allowing you to sneak the rest of the way in. She isn't the most impressed by this, but I'm not very impressed with lockpick. Cass is attracted to me, but her ex-lover Ranger Jackson is holding her hostage, so I remove the cockroaches from his basement and put them in his pillowcase. It's safe to say that he'll no longer bother her. Finishing up the quest for McLafferty, I decided to start bounty hunting. New Vegas Bounties is a mod that I've covered in the past, albeit very briefly. While I enjoyed the content of the mod, it quickly became repetitive, which is why I have not featured it since. Today I decided to give it another go to see if my opinion has changed. The mod adds roughly 20 or so unique quests that typically end in somebody's demise, which is a premise that I quite like a lot. There is a good variety and it takes you all over the map, which is great for somebody who has already gotten to level 20 or 30, but not something that I would recommend right off the bat as it takes you into some dangerous areas. Overall, I had a great time and there was enough variety that I didn't find myself bored due to repetition. I do believe that I will keep this mod in my loadout and I am interested in checking out the second part should we get around to it.
That's a shame.
Once the judge, the main antagonist featured in the mod, reached his demise, I was ready to meet back up with Cass to take out the trash.
As I live and breathe, Rose of Sharon Cassidy, the late Rose of Sharon Cassidy.
You are such an asshole sometimes.
The next step in our adventure is to meet a man known as Joe Sellers. If you have the Inheritance, a mod made by the same creator of New Vegas Bounties, this gentleman in Novak sends you on a wild goose chase to give a letter to a member of the West Side Militia, Bradley. Coming across Bradley sparks a wild firefight where he requests your assistance to deal with some fiends. As someone who enjoys combat, I was more than happy to lend a hand, and after some technical difficulties, I hand Bradley the letter from Joe, who was apparently his dad.
God damn, I haven't seen that many raiders since I guarded a caravan passing through 80s territory. You're a courier, right? After that little fracas, color me impressed. You moved like a merc. Glad you were here. Since we got a little breathing room, I'd like to check out that package.
The letter aims to explain a few things, as well as bestow upon Bradley the information of his inheritance, a vault full of loot. Suddenly, my butt puckered due to my love of Borderlands, so I tried to help out Bradley as much as what I could to allow him to take a break from his job so that we could visit the vault together. Like any good scavenger hunts, there are multiple steps that we need to accomplish, but before doing so, I first decided to prepare as much as possible, which consisted of stocking up on a few more pieces of gear and collecting Love and Hate, which just so happens to be an upgraded version of the spiked knuckles. Arguably, one could say that the Little Devil is the best normal holdout weapon in the game, but I wanted to ensure that I utilized a wide variety of gear, so I built this character to be able to do just that. Since Bradley had some questions about his inheritance, I returned with him back to Mr. Sellers. Unfortunately, he was dead when I arrived, and an assassin known as Hawkins almost took my life, but thanks to Bradley, I managed to live another day.
That guy was Syndicate, no doubt about it. Connected and dangerous. Fuck my life. Thing is, they wouldn't have sent that guy if the key wasn't worth it. Seeing as to how we're already on their radar, we may as well follow through and track down those keys. We've got nothing to lose now.
It turns out that a group called the Syndicate was after Mr. Sellers' treasure, and that we were being hunted as a result. The plot thickens, just as I do when I see a beautiful sundress. Up until now, everything has made a lot of sense, and seemed to fit in the game rather well, but then things started to get a little bit loopy. Bradley and I fought through several Nightkin and came across a strange altar, which was connected to some sort of underground bunker. As is Directional fashion, I didn't follow the lore too deeply for this particular location, but I had a lot of fun clearing it out, and surprisingly had no issues with glitches or game crashes.
Let's plug the key's grid data into your Pip-Boy. Damn, if I'm reading this right, we're headed for BFE, east of Nellis. Fuck it, we've come this far. I didn't survive the Nightkin revival just to quit now. Lead the way, partner.
The next location is far to the northeast, where I deal with super mutants and came across another bunker, this one full of even more bodies.
Fuck my life. Thanks a lot, Dad.
Here, son, here's a key to a death trap full of fuck always to die.
Bradley's dialogue throughout this was amazing, and I began falling in love with the character, more than I had with standard NPCs. Something about Bradley connected with me on a deeper level, and the voice acting was absolutely phenomenal, making me excited to keep him around for the rest of the playthrough. This affection for him continued to grow once we arrived in the reactor, where hordes of ghouls flooded out from the radiation. There was roughly 5 waves that I noticed, and the battle was close in certain sections, but this was some of the most fun that I've had in Fallout in a long time.
Let's plug this in and get the fuck out of here. I can feel the Rad-X wearing off. Okay, that's odd. Says the stash is in the Vegas ruins. Fiend territory.
Bradley found where we needed to head next, and we pushed our way through Fiend territory to get inside of the bunker. I was excited for the both of us to finally get our prize, when something devastating happened.
Fuck. Somebody just sealed that door up. We're trapped in this motherfucker.
We are just a group of businessmen with shared interests. There's nothing more to it. You and Mr. Bradley were kind enough to lead my scouts here, and perhaps... I respect your commitment, so I offer you this. I will let one of you leave. Right now. Who leaves is entirely up to you and Bradley.
Fuck, I don't want to do this, but... Fuck me, I'm sorry.
Don't do this, Bradley. He wants us to fight like caged animals. We're better than that.
That's goddamn right. I'm going out on my terms. Just promise me you'll reckon with these fucks. I was saving this Mother Darkness for a special occasion. Seems like as good a time as any. See you around, courier.
Walking out of the vault alone caused a lump to swell in the back of my throat, but it was quickly replaced with anger. I was eager to avenge Bradley, and fortunately I knew just the man I needed to speak to. Hastings down in the sewers connected me with the boss in exchange for some services, and I met up with a man known as Tony Chase. He talks a pretty big game, and his men ambushed me, but this section wasn't nearly as bad as dealing with the ghouls down in the reactor. A note on his body guided me to the next location, a shop that would be the front for the organization. Chems flooded through my system, and I made it down to the basement where I met up with a man known as Zimmer. Through some complicated and inorganic methods, he had rigged up a dead man switch to some explosives and the gold. He stated that I could either fight him on his terms with a katana, or he would blow it up. Given that I was unable to use a katana in this run, I took towards ensuring his demise, causing the gold and the treasure to be wasted. I thoroughly enjoyed this addition to the game, and will definitely be keeping it around long term as it felt very fitting and had a lot of variety while focusing largely on combat. With the promise of gold sneaking away from my grasp, a pang snagged at my chest, and my greed overwhelmed me enough to begin the Dead Money DLC. Dead Money has been featured on this channel numerous times, but even now I'm unable to tell you exactly why I like it so much. Perhaps it is the dark atmosphere, or arguably the increase in difficulty, but I like to believe that it is something more than that. When I was younger, I would play Minecraft every day after school, and I found myself falling in love with beginning again. In the same world, I would drop all my things into a chest and strike off to become something new. Sometimes I would take something like a pickaxe along with my journey to act as an heirloom of sorts, but outside of that, everything would be left behind, never to be used again. I didn't like the idea of creating a new world in fear of the memories escaping me, but for whatever reason, striking off allowed me to redefine who that character was, and part of me thinks that Dead Money facilitates this exact situation. It loads you into a new environment, much like I force use casings to become bullets again with the help of a hand loader. Now at level 20, I snagged up the Programmer's Digest in the storage room to get the machine code for 357 rounds. This would allow me to use the weapon that we picked up inside of the police station, the police pistol, for the remainder of this DLC. The police pistol, much to my surprise, is a holdout weapon, and as someone who loves the gun with a proper build, I definitely was ecstatic to see it make the list. I've used the police pistol extensively in the past, so I won't be using it for the entirety of this run, but just know that you'll see it around, especially here in Dead Money. Another weapon that makes the list is the Cosmic Knife and the associated upgrades. This weapon is less than amazing because it doesn't actually work with Super Slam, a big portion of our future melee setup. That being said, since we already have the vending machine code for the ammo, we're able to blast through the first opening sections with the police pistol and meet up with Dean. Despite my foolhardy confidence, I'm sure to loot as much as I can on the way to Christine. Since I have God and Anime on my side, I get his companion perk, which allows me to avoid stepping on floor-based traps. This is helpful for new players as well as those who are tired of wasting doctor's bags every time that they step over a bear trap. In this economy, healthcare is far too expensive for that kind of treatment. Signed, a US citizen. Fortunately, it gets slightly cheaper as we find the vending machine code for the step pack sitting on the desk of the clinic, before reaching up Christine's shirt to help her get her voice back. This was unsuccessful, but did manage to make things just a little bit harder for me. A few more ghost kills later, and I had started to prepare for the gala event. The police pistol held up as well as a hammock on a windy day, but with enough bullets, everything went well, and I was able to get the food for God, so then I wouldn't have to be a douchebag and lock him inside the cage, as much as I love caging big boys. After a combination of murder, a bit of bartering, and some suave conversation, Dean finds comfort with the holograms at his post, and I return to the location of the inflatable airbags. They shielded me from the worst of the speakers as I stepped inside and repaired the electric box. As someone who just recently completed Dead Money only using melee, being able to actually shoot the speakers brought me a great deal of joy, so I made sure to do so on every opportunity, but outside of that, this area was relatively routine. As a matter of fact, much of Dead Money was the exact same as a standard playthrough, only that I didn't get to use weapons like the automatic rifle or the hollow rifle, but it made very little difference thanks to my setup. Christine has always disappointed me with her display of intelligence, but eventually I used the Force to jiggle around her collar a little bit and encourage her to stay put. Several more broken limbs and inguinal hernias later, I fought my way through the maze that is the Sierra Madre. Despite the number of times that I've played through this DLC, it's harder than trying to find the will to live after working 80 hours a week. Despite this, my nipples remain puffy and I managed to trigger the event before escaping through the series of traps and corridors. It was then time to enter the casino itself. When God farted in my face, I was immediately knocked out, but when I woke up, something strange happened. I learned that by applying a similar technique with a melee weapon, I could fart in somebody's face, causing them to be knocked unconscious for a brief period of time. It's the little things like that that make me stick around and play Fallout all these years later. No other franchise could make that seem like a normal sentence. Maybe it's just me and I've gone insane after all this time, but I don't want to come off like a caked up emo, and the voices inside haven't confirmed this hypothesis. They've been speaking a lot of Latin recently, which I find strange. Something else that I always happen to find strange is the interaction with Dog and the Cantina. During my few attempts this run, I found out that by sprinting to all the repair valves essentially guarantees survival at the exchange of God and Dog. The second time, I learned something rather interesting. By playing the Dog command tape, one could develop a momentary conversation with God, even if he sees you, but all the valves still need to be repaired. If I would have known this during our last run, I could have potentially beat Dead Money without dying, but the final bunker still would have kicked my booty. Dean's segment goes relatively well as I spend a little bit more time enjoying his dialogue with him before grabbing the key to the closet and coming out. Sorry, Mom. Over the past several runs through Dead Money, we've gotten much better at clearing out these suites, which is visualized this run with my deft navigation through the pressurized segments. I even managed to figure out how to get inside the locked room with the makeshift armory. With a science of 50, a simple terminal hack will do the trick. Then I meet up with Christine and I face the entrance into the bunker. I managed to get through the jumping segments on the first try, and with a little bit of stealth, I juked the holograms so that I could get past the force field and into the vault itself. Being completely honest, I'm not exactly sure what happened in this segment, as I attempted to sneak through the force field with the help of quick saving and quick loading as I had in the past, but this resulted in Elijah being invincible, so I had to take a couple different approaches. It turns out that by attacking the turrets, Father Elijah will eventually leave, so all I needed to do was take him down before glitching through the door and leveling up to level 24, where I grabbed Chemist for essentially a quadrupled amount of chem duration with the help of Logan's Loophole. Once getting back to Mojave and putting myself back together, I began my grind for experience. I already had most of the weapons that I'd be using for the rest of the game, so leveling up became the big focus, but I also wanted an excuse to revisit some locations that I hadn't in some time. The most enjoyable part about Fallout New Vegas for me is being able to check out the various locations and just generally explore the game. I often get asked how many hours I think I have in New Vegas, and if I had to ballpark it, I would say about 2,000 between my time on Xbox 360 and Steam. To some people that is a lot of time, and to others it's not very much, but given my playstyle and my average playthrough time, one could say that I've beaten the game quite a few times. That being said, it always puts a smile on my face to learn something new. At some point along the way, I've added a substantial amount of mods to my experience, and it has made my enjoyment for the game even stronger. Since I'm not doing lore reviews, it really doesn't matter if I can't tell whether something is in the base game or not, as long as I enjoy its presence. Even the weapons in this game keep me on my toes. I honestly can't remember the last time I used Little Devil, due to how expensive it is and its rare ammo type, but I managed to fall in love with it during the course of this playthrough. Sure, the AI at certain points can be janky, but if you learn to not take things too seriously, it's comical what you can achieve in this game. I've done several challenge runs during my time here on YouTube, but many of my runs are not particularly challenging. Weapon restricting myself to the most powerful weapon of the game seems like something that doesn't need to exist, but Fallout New Vegas itself is easy and always has been. Even on the hardest difficulty with the hardest settings and mods to make the game more tricky, there's very few things that Courier 6 can't handle with the right setup. Somebody called me a gooner, and to be honest, I am, especially when it comes to New Vegas. I regret saying that when looking at somebody who is held against their will. Another person that is held against their will is Rao on top of Black Mountain. I made sure to use a variety of gear as I pushed through the radiated mountaintop, and the police pistol was rather enjoyable to use. After a few Nightkin get the drop on me and I take out the sniper carrying Annabelle, I repair Rhonda so that Tabitha could leave Black Mountain. It turns out that I might have done this segment a little bit too fast, as I had saved Raoul before I'd even gotten the experience from completing the crazy quest. Tabitha ended up speaking to me once again after I had saved him from his imprisonment, and we just ended up awkwardly standing around for a little bit. It was a good time. Wanting to get back at exploring, I clear out the fire geckos and a few fiends just outside of the West New Vegas ruins. I had a little bit too much fun seeing NPCs stuck in the walls, but Raoul and I prospered as we were able to get him into some beefier armor. Since I've made this character a little bit of a jack of all trades, I don't have the best pistol build, so the police pistol doesn't do nearly as much as what it has in the past, but I'm still impressed with what it can output. I'm also impressed with getting the random letters that threaten my existence. This makes me feel at home because of the copious amounts of threats that I receive here on YouTube for being slightly homoerotic. Okay, maybe more than slightly. If I were to compare myself and the Brotherhood of Steel in terms of how gay we are, I like to imagine that the fact that I wear socks makes a huge difference in this argument, and that I am significantly less gay. Now that I have successfully started digging myself into a hole, both in the choice of topics and my desire to go deep into the Brotherhood's Mojave chapter, I'd like to take the time to appreciate Handloader. When it comes to damage in Fallout New Vegas, there are several perks that boost up your damage by a small amount. The real beauty comes when you stack all these on top of one another, and custom ammo adds that creamy icing I love. As someone who has a thorough enjoyment of setting things on top of one another in precarious places, this process always feels amazing to me. That's right, I love Jenga. Once I get back to the Lucky 38, Mr. House sends me out once again. For whatever reason, it seems like he doesn't love me and doesn't want me to pleasure his shriveled corpse. Remember back in the day when I used to make all those necrophilia-based jokes? Those had me dead. Something we need to do now is try to prevent President Kimble from dying, and for whatever reason, companions usually have an aversion towards allowing this to happen, so I end up reloading a save and dismissing Raoul. With the explosive disarmed and me waiting politely for the sniper to show up, the president makes it out unscathed. A good way to earn experience in Fallout New Vegas is just by attempting to complete all the endings at the same time. Since Yes Man is a failsafe, one can interact with the Great Khans and try to disband their involvement with the Legion. This sees you chatting with Jack and Diane, as well as Melissa near Quarry Junction. With a little bit of smooching and the help of speech, Daddy Khan agrees to a suicide mission. I can't say that I feel morally great about this, but I'm not sure that I feel morally great about anything except for Sonny Smiles' breast tissue. Head Gunderson over at the Ultralux encourages me to look for his boy, and with my smuggled armaments, the Canoodlers are no match. Getting naked with Chauncey in the steam room resulted in his demise, but thanks to my fame on the strip, Marjorie welcomed me into the VIP section. I think that this just involves having interacted with Mr. House more than what I do in most runs, and that's why I'm unable to do it normally, but it was a cool experience being able to sneak into the back door. I'm not saying that the back door is more pleasurable than the traditional entrance, but I do appreciate that variety. Putting Felipe down, I rescue Ted and we sneak through the room full of people who drank drugged wine. And that marks the end of Beyond the Beef. With virtually all I could do for the main quest having been done, I started contemplating where my next steps are going to be. There was one weapon that I was interested in getting, and this saw me having a random need to collect a bunch of junk. The nuclear grenade is surprisingly a holdout weapon, and by revisiting Repcon, I could find various tins, a turpentine, and a Braxo cleaner. These grenades are supposed to be more powerful and also radiate the site of the explosive after its initial blast, which is interesting to note. For the collection of necessary supplies, I go all over the place and fight off the various people collecting my bounties. In Camp Gulf, there are several nuka quartz in the kitchen, which make up the nuka portion of the grenade, but something that I found even more interesting is how Rangers choose to sleep. I'm not sure if this is a method in disciplinary action or if this is the new ergonomic sleeping position, but it isn't long before I'm over at the tops, craving that sweet, sweet juice. I grabbed some off the shelf in the restaurant after shoving my face through the door, collected a few more at the Mojave Outpost, and ultimately managed to make 18 of these suckers. I, of course, had to use one immediately to give it a test, and I was almost immediately disappointed. We'll put the use of these bad boys in the back burner for now, but until then, I finish up doing a couple quests like shutting down the bottle cap press for McLaverty. This somehow sees me on my way to Vault 11 near the 188, and inside I fight the various giant mantises, re-irradiate myself for the powers of Radchild, and absolutely destroy the robots in the final kill chamber. As much as I want to uninstall the mod for Assaultrons, they have already managed to weave their way into my heart, and I have a sneaking suspicion that I'll keep them around. Since I was interested in being in a tight and enclosed space with people completely covered in sweats, I head over to Fiend territory to visit Vault 3. Little Devil quickly proved its worth once again as it did an absurd amount of damage that caused me to check my difficulty settings multiple times. In certain spots I also used the MFC grenades, but I wish I would have used some Nuka grenades as well. Once inside the vault itself, I did swap over to the 22 pistol to try to be a little bit more stealthy and to appreciate its absurd magazine size. Now done inside of the vault and stopping by Cook, I visit Major Daughtry to turn in the quest for a 3-card bounty. Lusting over experience, I became a Cazador hunter of sorts and explored the land near the bootlegger's place. Finally getting enough levels, I return to Mr. House, blast the NCR into a new universe to power the substation, stock up on some Kyle meat to trigger Atomic, restock on ammo and chems, and begin the final battle. This run had me using a lot of different weapons that I don't typically get to use, and going into it we already knew that it was possible, but I appreciated the extra variety as it forced me to try to build my character in a way that allowed me to use all the weapons. By grabbing perks like Mad Bomber and Demolition Expert, we developed our capacity to use grenades. With a solid crit build, our ability to use guns superseded what was necessary in many situations. Potentially the largest icing on the cake is picking up Super Slam, so our melee with Love and Hate is considered quite impressive despite having no other melee perks. Handloader was definitely helpful throughout this process, and visiting Dead Money secured our ability to use weapon repair kits and a copious amounts of chems, which when stacked with Radchild essentially made me invulnerable. The NCR and Legion alike stood very little chance against my armaments, and I began tramping through the narrow hallways in the dam itself with very little repercussion. I wasn't invincible, mind you, but given the fact that we had opted towards the highest DT light armor, I was impressed overall. I did attempt to use the nuka grenades a little bit, and they definitely worked, but I gotta be honest by saying that they weren't very satisfying to use for how expensive they were. I'm sure that if I spec'd more into explosives, they would have performed better, but with only one rank of Demolition Experts, they didn't quite meet my expectations. Something that not only met my expectations, but exceeded them was my fight with Lanius. During the first fight, I messed around with love and hate and completely butchered the tall, beefy man. I did, however, reload and attempt to fight with Little Devil, which was a little bit more effort on my part as I decreased the number of chems that I used substantially, but I still had a good time regardless. For the third and final fight, I pulled out my 22 pistol and popped a bunch of chems. If anything, this run further strengthens my love for the 22 pistol when combined with Steady, as its fire rate and magazine capacity can absolutely shred through enemies that have lighter armor with a good crit build. Oliver and his men caused my health bar to exhibit the volatility of the stock market this year, but in the end I came out on top and Mr. House finally topped me. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, be sure to leave a cute comment below. If a continuation of this run in the form of improved holdout weapons with taking this character to level 50 interests you, be sure to use the code phrase expand your prison wallet. Thank you to all the patrons and channel members for supporting my work. I truly appreciate you and would never have gotten here without your support. Thank you so much. With all that being said, do me a favor, will you? Have a good one.